And welcome back to another episode of Business is Pleasure with your two hosts. My name is Jonelle Francis, and I am accompanied by my beautiful companion. I held that note. My beautiful companion, Colette. She is the co-owner of Clarendon Co. And I am fortunate enough to also have her as my lover. So it's the best of both worlds most of the time. Some other times things are a little rocky, but you know what I mean? That's what relationships are about. Whether they're intimate or they're business, it's not perfect, but we figure things out to make it work.
You're right.
I'm being honest. It's true. It's about authenticity. That's what our business pleasure is all about. It's about authenticity, being genuine, so the people can have a better understanding of who are the owners of. Can you stop tickling my foot, please?
Sorry.
Stop tickle my foot. Like, let me relax. I'm trying to be professional. So it's all about authenticity, so people can have a better understanding of who are the co-owners of Clarendon Co. and what we just represent, you know. And I think it's kind of cool that. Oh, but sorry, but I'll get back to that. I think it's kind of cool part after. So with Business is Pleasure, we take the time to talk about our business, how our week has been, and also just to talk about our relationship as well too, how the business affects our relationship or how our relationship affects the business. Especially the idea of going in a business with a partner, whether that's your best friend, your girlfriend, boyfriend, cisgender, non-binary. I think it's really important just that whenever it's a close relationship, there can be sometimes tumultuous moments, but you guys really have to figure it out for the business. And the business is our clients. So that's what's always important. But the number one way we always start off Business with Pleasure is, how was your week?
That was a really big introduction. It was very long.
Why are you hating on me? Why are you doing that? Don't do that, babe. Hate is going.
My week was good. It felt like it just kind of like flew by.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
okay.
you know,
Let me hear this.
it just flew by. Like, went from one event to the next event. And like, honestly, in between was just kind of like, a regular week, but I don't know, the events just like keep piling on top of you, like one on the other, and like, it's cool, it's good. But
Yeah, and I think it's nice too because guys, just to let you know, if this is your first time checking us out, Colette never reciprocates the idea of asking me how my week was. Can you stop it? She's honestly done it to me once, okay? Once, so I just have to like kind of wing it on my own. So my week was
honestly, I literally never think to ask you.
yeah, you're really like self-interested and you only care about yourself, and it hurts my feelings. So whatever. So my week was honestly, it's kind of crazy because like running the business full time for me, it just seems like every day is more or less like meshed together because like the business is like a 24-hour system, and they say after 21 days you kind of have a habit is created. And now I've been running the business full time for about like 6 months now, or just under 6 months. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's just like, okay, on to the next. So those transitions of the days don't always hit me like they will with someone like you, who's like, one day you're teaching, one day it's Clarendon Co, one day it's FST, one day you're out with friends, you know what I mean? Where you have so much more, I guess, variables within your weeks and your days. Whereas me, it's just like, yeah, it's just Clarendon Co. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but do you ever feel like I feel like sometimes I worry that you're not like enjoying the process.
I've never been happier in my life, and I love it. There are some times where I think about, oh man, like, is this going to become like a bit overwhelming, or am I going to be underwhelmed? Because those are two things that I worry about. But then I think about it's like, one, I have a business partner that can help me take off some of that weight. And if I'm underwhelmed, the good aspect about having a business, we can create a new challenge. We can create something new, something that's innovative. So it's like, well, we feel as if we're doing something new, so I don't feel like stagnant. And that's what I like about the idea of doing a business. It's really all up to us. If we want something to change, we'll figure it out, you know? And I think for us, what I've always enjoyed was we force ourselves to have new ideas and to be as innovative as possible, not necessarily for ourselves, but for our clientele.
Yeah.
You know? Because we have this new product we've been working on where I think you guys are really going to enjoy. And that came out of just simply wanting change and wanting to introduce something new to our clients that we realized that was more or less missing within the industry. You know, because we did our research, we looked around, and we realized in the vintage community, all people want to do is sell you, sell you, sell you, sell you, sell you. And there are very limited people that actually just want to bring you value. So for me, it's just like, as long as we're constantly doing things like that bring our clients value and just enable us to constantly grow, I'm okay where we are. And to be honest with you, it's like, when I think about it, for myself, I get to buy clothes all day. That's what I do. I literally, so in my Instagram profile, it's textile and production. That's what it is. I'm like, no, I'm gonna change it to fashion buyer. So I do. Every day I just buy fashion. I love that. Like, you know.
What does textile and production even mean?
It just talks about like textiles is like different like garments, different materials.
It sounds
and
like fancy.
Yeah. It sounds cool, right?
It sounds bougie.
Yeah, you know me, babe. I gotta, spice it up a little bit. But realistically, it's like
You're not bougie.
Honestly, I'm not bougie, but there are aspects of me where sometimes it's like, yeah, I gotta like spice it up, make it look it's like when you're on the resume, it's like, worked in the retail environment, or like managed a multi-million-dollar company. It's like, yeah, I worked at McDonald's for a couple of years, you know what I mean? Because you gotta spice it up. But in reality of it is like, I sell old clothing for a living, and like, I personally, right, at this point in my life, I wouldn't change it for the world. I love it and I enjoy it, you know what I mean? Well, thank you. Do you ever see yourself maybe sometimes getting underwhelmed or overwhelmed with like whether it's teaching, Clarendon Co, or relationship?
I get overwhelmed like every 10 minutes.
Yeah, legit.
But like I feel like I handle it well.
Yeah, you
for
still
the most
here.
part. Yeah.
Like what?
I feel like I handle it well. Like I feel like I think about the things that like you don't necessarily think of.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, at the event, for example, you're wanting to play all this music with the most swear words in it, all these like children, and like people are like looking over. Well, honestly, they weren't really looking over, but I was just being extra critical.
Yeah.
But like I think about stuff like that. Whereas like,
yeah, or even the fact that like you helped us from like having a liability suit. So we had this carpet there, and it was like wrapped up in our room for like ever, and like so it was like really lumpy, and like Cotton and I literally tripped on the carpet at least like 10 times. The guy was like, oh my gosh, like. That's college thing. That's college thing.
No, I don't.
She always takes like a big gulp when she's like already about to like articulate herself or like say something about like long speech. She's like,
I don't do that.
So like let's try to like bring it down, like put some weight on it so like people don't trip over it. And with me, I'm like, people are fine. Like people are gonna be okay. But of course, like
20 people almost fell.
Yeah, like of course that's what's good about Colette. She's like extra cautious, where she'll take the time to realize, hey, like can we just try and like mitigate as much as possible so nothing happens, you know what I mean?
That's like a really bad event.
No,
like,
100%.
Someone falls and hurts themselves.
Oh my gosh, no, trust me. But I think that's one thing that like, I think a lot of people, as small as that may seem, it's like, oh yeah, well, the cautious one. I think a lot of times that's why it's important to like get into business with someone that's more or less the opposite of you or has different elements within themselves that they can bring to the business that you may not necessarily have.
Yeah, and it's the same like old saying when people are like, yeah, opposites attract. Like it goes for like relationships too. Like not to say that people who are the same, it won't work in a relationship or in like any type of like working setting that requires you to work together, but like sometimes it is a little bit easier and manageable to work with someone who is not exactly the same as you.
Yeah, and I think that's important too. It's like, okay, well, if you're creative now and you're really good at designing, you're really good at branding, really good at marketing and things like that, but you don't necessarily understand the business aspect. It's like, okay, well, what are some laws you guys can work on? What are some accounting things that you guys can do? Or even just how to turn $1 into $1.10. That's when I think it's a perfect relationship for you and someone else to like more or less get into bed together so you guys can figure something out, you know what I mean? And I think sometimes, especially at the beginning stages of any business, you are the accountant, you are the marketer, you are the PR person as well too, So like you're more or less forcing yourself to be all these things, but of course when it becomes that time that not necessarily expand, but the business is growing, it's maybe you want to take some of those things off your shoulders and realize, hey, like I'm not that good at this, let me put this on someone else's shoulders so they can help the business move in such a smoother direction.
And I think that's a great thing about growing a business, and like for me, like that's a motivating factor. Because like, to be honest, like there's a lot of stuff that we do for our business that like, yeah, I do it because I know that it's gonna get us to like X, Y, or Z, but I don't necessarily like doing it or enjoy doing it. And like to me, that's a motivator to like do all of the things that I don't want to do, so that eventually one day we can be at the point where I don't have to do those things anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy too, because like I think that's just like a good follow-up question that we can ask each other. Like, what are some of the motivating factors that push us to continue this business, you know? Because I remember there was a point where like we were doing so bad, and there were hundreds of motivating factors that was like, yeah, like let's stop this right now. You know, we're talking about 3 months without sales, Instagram wasn't growing, had no marketing strategy, didn't know where to find clothes, you know? So like at this point, what do you think is a motivating factor that pushes you to continue the growth in Clarendon & Co?
I think just like the legacy. Like, I feel like I want to build myself up to the point where I can provide something of value to like my family and my children, and pass something down to people, or employ people, give people jobs, or provide people with like useful and valuable information. Like I just like, I'm motivated in the idea that like I want to build something that is beneficial and valuable to other people, and that will be around a lot longer than I will.
Yeah. And it's crazy too, because like you can't do that without, of course, facilitating the client's needs. You know? And sometimes I think within our business, like we have to realize what are the small things that we're doing that may more or less push a client away. Like, you know what I mean? Whether it's like, hey, we're taking too long to respond sometimes. Like, hey, are we taking too long to ship out a product? Do we even have the products that the customer wants?
Yeah.
Like, you know? So I think like within saying that, as much as like we want all these goals for ourselves,
Maybe take the small step first.
exactly, and first ask ourselves like, what values Clarendon & Co really, really, really bring to the client, you know what I mean? And I think that's why, like for me, I really want us to focus on like always bringing value to them, always bringing value to them.
And I think it's like the idea like Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah.
Like that saying, it's like you can't get to the end result or like the big like momentous like final step without doing all of the little things to get to that point.
And that's what's important too, you know? It's like we're trying to more or less build a system that we can just constantly generate income, generate value to our clients, and more or less like transition this system over into something else, and hopefully it's gonna get to something bigger, you know? Because we've talked about this before, like we have ideas where we want Clarendon & Co to go, but sometimes I think that when you're in it, you don't realize how far you've gone or how far you can go, you know?
Yeah, you don't see it. It's like that whole saying like hindsight is 20/20. Is that the thing?
I don't know.
It's like when you look back, everything's so clear, but when you're in the midst of it, you can't really have that clarity. But once you get through it and you look back and you're like, oh, that made sense. I should have done this. I should have done that. Or like, that was a great thing that I did. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't realize it until like you actually go through it.
No, 100%. And one thing I think that like we've been going through like the last 2 to 3 years is that we've been consistently going to like the Toronto Vintage Clothing Show, and this weekend was incredible. Big shout out to the Toronto Vintage Clothing Show. Big shout out to Catherine and her team there. Those guys are incredible. I know it sounds like I'm sucking a lot of ass right now, but they deserve it. They did an amazing job. Not to say that their other events aren't good. Their other events were always consistent, always well put together. They have a great standard of communication, and they're non-stop professionals. But what they did this weekend, I don't know, man.
It was literally like the holy grail of an event. Like, picture just being busy from the second the door opens to pretty much the second that the door closes. Like, on the first day, on the Saturday, like, we didn't even have time. Like, usually we'll have like a bit of a slow period in the daytime. Like, it'll take about an hour and a half for things to start going, because like for the most part our demographic doesn't usually come out until like 11-12 at the earliest, right? Sometimes like all 1-2 o'clock, right? So like usually it takes us a little bit more time to kind of get the sales going, but literally from the second the door opened, it was just like bam, 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 all the way till the end. We didn't even like eat until like
1:30, 2 o'clock. Yeah. It's funny though, because I remember going down to the car, then walking back up, and I remember doing SneakerCon was at the same location, and there was this big line of just people there when we did SneakerCon, right? And then when I got upstairs from going to the car, there was this huge line of people for the Toronto Vintage Clothing Show. and I could not believe it. From then I was like, yeah, like today's gonna be good. But I didn't know it was gonna be good from the beginning, because again, like our demographic, right, they're a bit younger. So in our mind, it's like, okay, well, it's gonna get busy for us around 12 and between 12 and 2 o'clock. And it was literally busy the whole day. I think maybe we stopped being busy from 4 to 5 because that's when it was ending, and then maybe like a half an hour in between that.
Yeah.
You know, the whole show was just so well put together. But one thing I really do like about the Toronto Vintage Clothing Show is how organized they are. You know what I mean?
Organized.
There are over 150 vendors that they have to deal with, whether it's people with antiques who have big trailers that they gotta move in, or people like us who do vintage clothing.
Yeah.
They have the times all separated for people, so everyone has a designated time that they should be setting up and also being able to break down. And then you have this really like seamless communication. If you have any questions, you can hit them up, they'll respond in a reasonable time.
Yeah.
And plus, like the venue that they were forced to like move to this year, I think that was a huge contributor in why the event went so well. So they usually have it at the same grounds, the exhibition grounds in Toronto, at the Princess Building. And the Princess Building is like one of the older buildings of that area. So it's not as well known as the Enercare Center, which where they had it this year at the Enercare Center. And it was just perfect. I think just because of the name of the Enercare Center, that definitely helped bring more people through and everything. And it overall was just a really, really good event. And
Really
like,
good.
I have nothing bad to say about it.
And it's nice to be part of an event that you know is always going to be run smoothly.
Yeah.
Because like that sometimes is like a little bit of a frustrating point for us, especially because like we do so many events, and sometimes like we're traveling far places for events, and it's never a nice feeling to be like, oh, like, is everything organized? Is everything okay? And like, you obviously don't want to be annoying, but you also want to make sure that everything's still good. But the good thing about like the Toronto Vintage Clothing Show and all of the events that they run is like, you literally never have to worry about anything. You know you're gonna have all your information. All you have to do is follow the instructions and show up, and you're good.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that's really good is because like they know that we're their customer. And I think sometimes a lot of these people that do events, they take your money and it's like, okay, well, figure it out for yourself, you know?
Yeah.
We'll go to somebody else, they're like, yeah, just take any table you want, or like they can't find your email address.
Yeah.
Or like, you know what I mean? There isn't like really clear directions on how you should be unloading it or loading back up, you know?
Yeah.
But with these guys, of course, like they've been doing it for 10 plus years. So the experience is there, which is extremely important.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing, like, even talking about the idea of experience, that's one thing every business needs to go through. It's like that experience factor to get better, you know? Like you're constantly sharpening that knife, they're sharpening their tools.
You need to go through the growing pains.
No, 100%, you know what I mean? And I think even with us, with Clarendon & Co., we also need to understand, it's like, of course, we'd love to be at like a certain area with our business, but first, we need to more so like understand that like we have to do things more or less in a chronological order. Like, you know, like we had to figure out like, hey, like how do we market stuff? We had to figure out our products. Then we had to figure out the better events to go through. Because when you think about it, all those things we were horrible at, you know? We had horrible products, we didn't know our audience, we didn't know how to market ourselves, we didn't know which events to go through. We didn't even know how to work together, you know what I mean? So I think like that's what, I'm assuming that's what they went through one point or another, you know what I mean?
I wouldn't imagine so. I feel like at some point, like, yeah, it'd be nice that we all get lucky and we're all like hit our big break one time, and then that's like, you know, a great business going forward. But a lot of the times when you hit your big break or you have that thing that comes so quickly and easily, it's a lot of the times, not always, but a lot of the times it's not the most sustainable. So the good thing about like following a journey or some sort of like sequential type of thing is it allows you to create a system. It allows you to create something that is like reproducible in a way.
And the craziest thing about the system too, it has to be adaptable. If the system is so sequential that it can't be changed, it's a bad system.
Yeah.
And I think what we've been able to do is like slowly realize what can change and what can't change. So for instance, when we initially started Clarendon & Co., we were selling like these jeans that weren't necessarily doing the best. And then over the last maybe like 2 months or about a month or so, we introduced the jean product because we realized, hey, we have a lot of access to these jeans, one, and two, they're actually on trend right now, you know? So even at the Toronto Vintage Clothing Show, we probably had maybe like 60, 65 pairs of denim shorts and jeans combined. And we ended up selling, how much did you say?
Almost 50.
Almost 50 pairs, you know what I mean? So we're selling what, maybe it was like 75, 80% of our jean stock all in one day. And I think that just goes to show it's that like, you have to go through that more or less growing pains of your product as well to realize what products work well and what don't work well.
And also just like trial and error, because like imagine if we were like, yeah, this didn't work back like 2 years ago, so it's never gonna work again. Like I'm really happy and grateful and appreciative of the fact that like we listened to other people, we listened to the market, and we were like, you know what, let's try out these jeans again. And if we didn't, we would have lost out on 50 items worth of sales, which is a lot.
Yeah, no, definitely, which is crazy, a lot. And I really like that idea of it's like, hey, like what other items maybe should be like reintroduced that maybe didn't work before but now are working now, you know? Because there are some items when I see them all the time when I go thrifting, and it's like, oh crap, like this would be dope, but now we don't have the clientele for that, you know? And I think sometimes we're so focused up on like working with the younger clientele that we miss out on
like the older people.
Yeah, or not necessarily the older people, just the clientele that is somewhat more or less different from our clientele, you know what I mean? But then it goes back to the idea like if you try to make something for everyone, you end up like serving nobody, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So at the same time, it's like, yes, let's focus on our niche right now. And of course, when that gets bigger, that's when we can, okay, no, let's expand now, you know?
I feel like our expansion is a lot easier and more manageable to do through events. Like it's harder to like expand online because a lot of times we don't know who's buying our product. But like our events are a really good learning opportunity to like try out different things. Like it doesn't cost us anything to bring like a different type of clothing or a few other extra items that we wouldn't necessarily usually carry to an event, right? Whereas like if we're posting it online, it's obviously a little bit more time consuming, et cetera, et cetera. It may take a little bit longer for us to actually see like that there's an interest in one particular product over another. So I feel like events are a great place to just like try it out. Like if you see that like online a particular item is doing really well, like bring it to an event, see if it does well for you too.
No, 100%. And I think one thing that also allowed us to do so well with the jeans is because like we know our demographic and we knew the type of demographic that would be at the Toronto Vintage Clothing Show.
Yeah.
If this was at the beginning stages of our business, we would have had no idea what products we needed, no idea what type of clientele would have been there, you know?
And even like the clientele in itself at like say something like the Toronto Vintage Clothing Show has changed so much, even in the short amount of time that we've been doing it. Like when we first did our Toronto Vintage Clothing Show, it was like the average age range was like 40 to like 70.
Easily.
And like, you know what I mean? You'd see like a one couple speckle of like younger people here and there, but like it wasn't like how it is now. Now it's all like, it's a, like I'd say it's like 60-40, 50-50 maybe.
It's crazy because I remember when we first started, it was like kids going with their parents.
Yeah.
Now it's kids going together.
Yeah.
And like, you know, groups of friends going together. Like, yeah, we heard about this on Instagram, so we decided to come down, you know what I mean?
It's completely different, completely different. And I feel like that's been like a really positive change and it's really positively affected our business.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy too because like the Toronto Vintage Clothing Show though was like always on trend for their demographic, but then they were able to like more or less slip into a new demographic, right? Which is kids from the like early 90s to the early 2000s, you know what I mean? Because now those things are now on trend one and now they're becoming vintage. So like they fall into a brand new category as well too. So it's kind of interesting how like they can always find a way to be relevant and stay around as an event company as long as they're on trend with what's vintage and what's
for that period.
Exactly, right? Because I remember when we first started, they stayed, like Catherine and them, they had said to us, it's like, you guys are the new faces of vintage, you know what I mean? So it's like, for them to remain relevant, they need more or less like people like us who carry those types of products. Or like who more or less market to those new demographics that they need to continue their business, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, so that's always important, you know what I mean? And I think one thing that really helped us as well with those events too is that like online we have fees we'd have to pay through an app like Grailed, or shipping costs as well too. So lowering our prices a bit to match the market at the time I think works really, really well for us, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. And it helps us to sell a lot more because some of the, like I feel like majority of people today are pretty used to and familiar with online shopping, especially for some things that we were carrying like Levi's jeans for example. So if you're buying something like that online, it's a pretty high markup a lot of the times.
Let people know how much with brand new
like,
pair of
like a brand new pair of Levi's is anywhere from like $80 to like $130 sometimes, right? So it can get really, really pricey. So if we're selling Levi's jeans for say like 2 pairs for $50 and like you know, we're still making a pretty good profit off of that. People are happy to purchase that because it's a lot different, a lot cheaper than what they'd be buying, say, online or in a store, right? And they're getting to try on the product, they're getting a great quality product, so it's a win-win at the end of the day. And then for us, at the same time, we have the ability to lower our prices even a little bit more than we would, say, online, because we're not taking into account the excess shipping cost for shipping something so heavy like denim. So it's a win-win for everyone.
No, most definitely, and I think that's what's most important in like any business transaction. It's like, does the customer feel like they're getting their value based on how much they're spending, and do we feel as if like we're being able to help the client get this product for them, right?
Yeah.
So I think as long as like both parties feel that like they're being compensated properly,
Yeah.
I think it's perfect.
Of course.
No, most definitely. So for me, I think it's just good, man, because like we've been through the ups and downs of the business and like struggled a lot. So to finally see things like, trust me. So to find this last year.
I know.
Honestly, because what this is we're going into year 4.
Yeah.
Right. So like it's been like 3 years and about like 4 months running the business now, and this last about like year and a half has just been really good. So it's nice. It's nice to see where the business is going and where we can go with the business. So you know, all we gotta do right now is like just keep our feet on the pedal and just keep pushing. You know, is there anything else you want to add before we head out of here?
I never have anything else to add.
Okay. One thing I want to say is that be consistent and constantly build relationships. Once you do that in every business, people are more likely to want to help you, and when they're consistent, they're more likely to want to trust you. For instance, perfect example with the Toronto Vintage Clothing Show, we've been able to build a relationship with them, doing more than like 15 events with them for the last like 2 years, I would say. So we have a really close relationship with them where we can trust them, knowing that they're gonna always put on good events. And also with us, we're always gonna be good vendors to try and accommodate the clientele that they do bring in for us. So those are 2 things I definitely say always try to focus on, guys. But until next time, peace.